I want to say that as I was reading this, who did I happen to think of but our dear Sophia? Our dear Sophia, who is very much notices tenses. And of course, we have the Brahmins who in the past and in the future and at present. And to me, when I read this, it speaks to a human nature that is unchanging. It, as it was in the past, it is in the present, it will be in the future. This nurturing of craving, this nurturing of acquisition is sort of like the human condition. There's no time that it hasn't been around. There seems to be no time that it won't be part of our legacy as living beings. Stephen?
Yeah, I think it's just this way. It's not because the Buddha said so. It's not only happening when the Buddha is teaching. It's just sort of seemingly structural to existence. It works this way. Yeah.
Could I back up a little bit?
Sure, Todd.
Pardon me, I wasn't here last, whatever day that was, Thursday. But do you think when they say acquisition, is he talking about material acquisitions, or is he talking about a new birth or a new life?
I don't think he's talking about a new birth or a new life. I think he's talking about both material acquisitions and also the kind of acquisitions in terms of building up a self, in terms of building up a sort of psychological repository of a sense of I am like this, tastes, dislikes, theories, all that kind of stuff, I think is what he's talking about, acquisition. But I don't think it's referring specifically to acquiring various lifetimes or life spans.
Sort of like how some people collect degrees in order to prop up their sense of being highly educated. Some people are art collectors, they're very cultured. I think we can look at it in those terms as well. And I just want to say what I found very, very interesting in this section was the notion of nurturing craving. I've always, in the past, saw it as, perhaps I was a bit of a victim of craving. It's not my fault that I want to have a Diet Coke or whatever the heck it is. It's just like, I'm this victim of circumstance, but it's actually this craving that we have is something that it seems to me that we're, as I'm reading this here, that we're actually nurturing that state of mind and that propensity towards craving. And I think what's so powerful about that is since we are nurturing craving, we can also kind of cease that, or at least have that intention.
Can I ask a question?
Can I ask a...
Yeah, we got 3 questions. Okay, let's
Whoa.
go for it.
Question.
So we have Sue-Ann, we have Diane, and I forgot who was it, Gary?
Yeah. And Sophia.
And Sophia, okay.
Okay.
Let's start with Diane. I'm just going from top to bottom. We'll start with Diane, and then Sophia, and then Gary, and then Sue-Ann.
Well, I've got the book, and there's a note, number 187, that talks about acquisition as the aggregates. It says, for here the 5 aggregates are intended by acquisition. This is from SPK, which I don't know what that is. It says the standard exegetical analysis.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it says exegetical
Okay,
analysis of upati is fourfold as defilements, aggregates, sensual pleasures, and volitional formations. So I took that to be, I should think of the acquisitions as the aggregates, because it's the aggregates that give us our sense of self.
Yeah, that's right, because we've talked about how the 5 aggregates are called in Pali the 5 clinging aggregates, and the word for clinging is upadana. And although they're not linguistically related, upadana and upadi are very closely related because they're about taking up or placing upon. And so, yes, the aggregates can be certainly thought of a big part of acquisition. But I think you mentioned SPK is referring to the name of the commentary for the Samyutta Nikaya. It's called the Sarata Pakasani. But you mentioned, I think, 4 things that commentary says that clinging, or I'm sorry, upadi is, right? What were the other 3?
Defilements,
Yeah.
agate, sensual pleasures, and volitional formations.
Which is interesting because volitional formations is one of the aggregates. And in fact, all 5 aggregates are said sometimes, I think, to be part of volitional formation. So yeah, that's a big thing, and they kind of all revolve around each other. But was that a question or just a kind of a statement?
Well, my question is, when we were discussing acquisitions, why didn't we refer to this question, to this note in the book, which says the 5 aggregates are intended by acquisition according to that source who wrote the note, or where the note came from?
Well, how do we take up things? We take them up by seeing them, right? That's a big part of the 5 aggregates, right? How do we take up things? We take them up as psychological. How do we do that? By formations. That's an aggregate. It's just another way of saying it as far as I can see.
Okay.
Can I say something about this topic?
Well, let's get to people that were asking. Were you in the question line?
I was not in the question line.
Let's get through the question line first.
Okay, we're going to do Sophia, Gary, Suan, and then David.
Yes, I continue with this thought about if it is our human nature and craving, as I remember you talking about eating chocolate and me eating fruit. Anyway, it's craving. Then my question is, because of craving, we are studying Buddhism, or we are trying to read that. Then craving is not only something that is negative. And I don't know if Buddhism have this kind of idea, the positive, negative, but for me, craving could be based in volitional formation, good things that can help us to develop our condition beyond nature, beyond human nature, that I don't know where is it and what is it. It's a question.
So
is craving the same that desire, and could be a desire that help us to follow a path to Dharma, for example?
I think, Stephen, here to answer that question, I might introduce the notion of Tanha versus Chanda. Tanha being craving, and whereas Chanda is like having this wholesome desire to have a strong desire to learn and understand and live the Dharma. Do you want to explain that a little bit further, Stephen?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think that, of course, unless you are acting as somewhat of a rock, you have to make formations. You have to have desires. But tanha is considered an unwholesome desire. It's not talking about the desire to do good things. It's not necessarily a wholesome thing. So yes, we can desire good things too, in that sense. We can desire helping others. We can desire to be free from suffering, of course. But that kind of desire doesn't seem to be playing into this equation.
Okay.
Okay, and then we had Gary, Suan, and David. So Gary?
Yeah, I just had a comment related to acquisition as well. I mean, that term seems unique to me, and I would have to think at some level, it can't negate the dependent origination and the normal steps, which I think between craving and aging and death are, I think it's clinging, becoming, and birth. but it sounds like it's not meant to be a contraction of that or something like that. So just for curiosity, I was looking around and I happened to go out to the site where Thanissaro Bhikkhu has his translation. And he mentioned something that I thought was interesting. He said the use of the terms related to acquisition, and he mentions another one that had to do with the word settle, which is part of the text later. He says is more typical of the Sutta Nipata than of the Samyutta Nikaya. You know, and he sort of gives a little explanation after that. But I was just curious if anyone's familiar with the Sutta Nipata and whether the word acquisition is used more frequently there.
I'm not really prepared to give a frequency analysis of Pali terms in the canon, especially not in this class. But are you saying you don't understand what Upati is referring to here?
I get it, but it's just, all I'm trying to say is that it's a different word that's put in, but the other words or the other pieces of dependent origination are still supported, obviously, right? So we're just saying that the word acquisition here just doesn't have the same meaning as, because I can sort of extend it. I can think, well, it was just a contraction. When you think of clinging, you're acquiring. When you think of becoming, you're trying to acquire. And birth is an acquisition of another existence. You know what I mean? So at first, when I read it, that's how I looked at the word acquisition. But so I'm still kind of struggling with what the actual meaning is.
Yeah, it's certainly the Buddha, as we said, doesn't always present dependent origination in the same way. He can use different terms, and he can use some of the terms, and he sometimes presents it in forwards or backwards order. So it's not only a fixed equation.
Yeah.
And so he seems to be looking at something from various angles. Maybe we can say that.
Okay. Right, thanks.
Thank you, Gary. Sue-Ann?
Sort of touched on this last week, and you might have covered it, Stephen, just before when I think Sophia asked something. I have a problem delineating between whether or not something is actually, is anything that I would desire. So I love Kandinsky. He's my favorite painter, okay? So if the Metropolitan is having a show on Kandinsky, I would like to go and see it. And that gives me pleasure. Do I have to consider that as the beginning of nurturing, of craving, because I know that it gives me pleasure to look at those paintings? Is anything that's not conditional that we receive either, and it could be either way, it could be pain or pleasure. I mean, you know, we could seek either thing, but I know that unconditional joy or unconditional pleasure is where we would like to attain, we would like to attain. So I understand that looking at these paintings or reading Shelley or having a, you know, or something that I enjoy eating, is everything considered the beginning of craving is, I guess, my question. It seems real simple, but to me, it kind of blocks me. I don't think the Buddha meant us to go around to be like blank robots. Do you understand my question? I don't know if I'm articulating what I really want to say.
I understand your question, Sue-Ann. I mean, and I've heard you raise it upon many occasions too. So I know it's one that you struggle with.
I really struggle with it.
Yeah, and I think you're not alone in that. I know a lot of people have this question, well, I'm Buddhist, can I still have fun? And then the answer to that is absolutely. You can still enjoy things, without a doubt. But the whole issue is there craving involved? Like if you don't go to the Kandinsky exhibit, you know, is it going to destroy your life? Is everything predicated upon your attaining that? And also, is your enjoyment fully experienced, of course, but also tempered with the realization that that enjoyment is occurring within samsara. It doesn't mean that you can't fully enjoy. I mean, I love going to museums. You know, I can't wait until, I guess, a Metropolitan's open a few days a week, but enjoy it, like it, and do not cling to it if you can help it, and know it's not the end all be all. And I'm not sure, Stephen, if you have something else. And I will absolutely assure you the Buddha did not want us to be non-feeling entities, you know, like automatons. No. Stephen?
Thank you.
You bet.
Well, I don't think we could even opt to be non-thinking automatons, even if we wanted to. I don't see how that could even be possible unless we somehow took some drugs to just make us incoherent or got a lobotomy. And so the question is, what do we choose to look at or taste or whatever? And of course, we have to keep in mind that the Buddha was quite often talking about ending suffering, ending dukkha, or at least trying to reduce dukkha. And so the question seems to be tied to a type of inward exploration. We have to look in ourselves, and we have to see whether what we are choosing to do is leading towards further suffering, or is it leading towards less suffering, or maybe no suffering? And I think only the practitioner can answer that question for themselves. These instructions are guideposts. These instructions are modes of thinking for us, but we have to figure out, can we see craving? Can we see further suffering? And so you have to sort of do that inner exploration, as the Buddha is asking these Kuru people to do. And he's kind of giving us the answer in a sense, but it's not really so important to get the answer. I think it's more important to engage in the practice, because if you don't see it personally, it's just sort of something to know. But we're not really doing comparative religion here. We're trying to figure out how to
it's experiential. I understand. Yeah.
It's experiential. So I mean, it seems to me that's what we should be trying to do. We should be looking at how we engage at the world, with the world, in the world, and see what does that cause us to be like? What happens to us when we do it? And so if we do something and then we're like, wow, I need more of that right away, well, perhaps that sense of lack is a type of dukkha, and perhaps it's not the best thing to engage in. But I would say, as a musician, that certainly types of art can be extremely edifying and valuable and important to help one understand themselves. And so I would definitely not advocate shunning the arts in any way.
Right. I just kind of that popped in, but yeah, I have struggled with this for a while, and I know it's not something that's like an as you say, it's not like a test or a competition with myself. It's an experiential thing. But sometimes when I read this, and of course he keeps going over it and over it, the bhikkhus and the Brahmins, rather, before and present and future. You know, if you crave this, if you it'll lead to acquisition, it'll lead, and it all leads to dukkha. And so I'm wondering, like, well, how far down the line? But that's because I'm getting too up in my head about it. So I understand what you're saying, and I think I know what the right thing for me is. I think, most of the time I try to do the right thing, and I think it is an experiential thing. And I'm pretty sure I know when I'm doing something that's a craving and when I'm not really, it's not the be all and end all. It's just something that, well, this is really nice and I appreciate it. And, I go on with the rest of my day. So I thank you both for your answers. Thank you.
Thank you, Suann. Next we have David.
Okay, so I'd actually like to give a I don't know, maybe a short response to Sue-Ann also. So this is a thought that, so I think that, I mean, it makes sense to me that the problem of craving is something that's happening all the time or pretty much all the time in response to everything or pretty much everything. But that doesn't mean that the Buddha said the thing you ought to do is avoid all pleasures. If a person, like one path that the Buddha opened up was to ordain as a monastic. And if a person ordains as a monastic, they live they have this renunciation kind of life. And that involves avoiding certain things. But he didn't say you have to stick. He has a path for lay people too. And for lay people, like if a person, there's nothing in the 5 precepts that says you can't go to see a show or go to a museum. In the 8 precepts, which people like, they might take them if they do a meditation retreat, that involves some kind of thing about not doing certain kinds of entertainment. I don't know the exact text, but like no singing, no dancing, no shows. I'm not sure exactly what it says. But this is not like a lifetime commitment that the Buddha requires for a lay person. So a way to look at it is, there's this problem of craving, and it applies to maybe everything. But the solution is not necessarily to avoid pleasurable things, especially, and in particular, not to avoid pleasurable things in the world. Like to do that, you could look at that as a more renunciation kind of life, but this isn't that like as far as I understand it, this is not a requirement for a layperson. If a person is really interested in renunciation, maybe they would become a monastic. The Buddha didn't say you have to become a monastic. And there are lots of lay people who achieve different states of enlightenment in the suttas. I think I remember a case of someone walking on stilts who became a stream enterer, so maybe doing some kind of entertainment thing there. So I don't know if that's helpful or not.
I might also add that certainly, I mean, maybe we can have Ayavimala answer this question, but it seems to me from talking to monastics that becoming a monastic does not exactly solve the problem, because there's plenty of things you can crave as a monastic as well. I've heard talk to many monastics talk about the problems of sexual attraction or food attraction or any kinds of attractions. It's just simply structural. But I think we should get back to the sutta because we have more to read and we're running out of time.
Okay.
So I think we're up to reading section 10. Who is
David,
our reader
David
now?
I think that's still me.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
Okay,
I'm
can you scroll down for me, please?
Yeah, I've got all of your faces here. I'm going to move you all to the side of my screen, but it's not so easy. There we go. Okay, here we are.
Okay. Suppose, bhikkhus, there was a bronze cup of a beverage having a fine color, aroma, and taste, but it was mixed with poison. Then a man would come along, oppressed and afflicted by the heat, tired, parched, and thirsty. They would tell him, "Good man, this beverage in the bronze cup has a fine color, aroma, and taste, but it is mixed with poison. Drink it if you wish. If you drink it, it will gratify you with its color, aroma, and taste, but by drinking it, you will meet death or deadly suffering." Suddenly, without reflecting, he would drink the beverage, he would not reject it, and thereby he would meet with death or deadly suffering.
Okay, here we are. Here we have it, people. This is life in samsara. So what happens? We have this individual, and he's presented with this beautiful bronze cup, and it's got the beverage in it is pretty, and it smells delicious. Oh, the only downside is it's mixed with some poison. But, other than that, it's like really amazing. Here he is. He's really, really thirsty. And he's been in the heat. And it's like, here, you want this because you're really thirsty. The only thing is it's got some poison. And then we notice that suddenly and without reflecting, he drinks it. And then he meets death or deadly suffering. So what are we to make of this? Is this once again, Stephen, the example of the person who loves kale just a little bit too much?
Organic carrot juice.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I think as you said, the key of the key point to draw out from this paragraph is perhaps suddenly without reflecting. And so it's about not understanding what you're doing. It's not paying attention to what's happening for you in real time in your mind, suddenly without reflecting. And so again, the Buddha is advocating for inner reflection, inner introspection.
I mean, and I have to say, like with your question, Suan, this is what makes it hard. It is resting on the individual to do the hard work of inner knowledge, which is required in this Buddhist practice, and self-honesty. It's not like we're presented with a bunch of rules, like, for example, the 10 Commandments. And with that, you don't have to think, really. You just do what it says and you're good to go. But I think what Buddhism is asking us is a lot more than that. The good side of it is, to me, at least as a Buddhist, it offers a lot more as well. It does offer the chance of liberation, not just after this life, but even during this life. So yeah, I speaking of kale, Stephen, when you mentioned that, I just realized, I just remembered, I had a friend, we were in our 20s, and this was at Whole Foods. Whole Foods started in Texas, and we were in Houston, and she kind of had this addiction for carrot juice, and she was kind of like a trust fund baby, so she was able to get 3 carrot juices a day, and she did. She would go to the juice bar. She didn't have a job because, she didn't have to. But, it's a really healthy thing, isn't it? And she ended up getting this condition, which I had never heard of. It's called keratinosis, where like she started, she started turning orange.
Right.
So she had to lay off the carrot juice. And that's just by way of example. It's just a funny little example, but we can overdo anything. And it doesn't have to be, when I first read this, I was thinking of alcohol and kind of how I feel as though we're all encouraged to drink a lot more lately, which is alcohol's very toxic substance. But, it's like what Stephen was saying. We can do this with anything. We can do this with anything.
We can do it with reading Dhamma. We could do it with talking about Dhamma. We can do it in an unwholesome way, and we can do it in a wholesome way. And only through inner reflection can we find out what's happening.
So yeah, it requires a lot more of this. I've done it with Dhamma, you guys. Okay, don't tell on me. But I've been on the subway when people used to go to work here in New York City. And I've been reading my Dhamma books. And if someone needed to get up or sit down or pushed me or whatever, I would have like this feeling of great umbrage. Like, what are you doing? I'm trying to read this spiritual book and you're just like in my way. So I'm like propping up myself as this like knowledgeable practitioner of Buddhism, really learning, and then reacting in a negative way towards a perfect stranger on the subway. And we see people do this all the time with other types of religions. How many times do we see religious leaders who fall in disgrace? I don't know. There are just many different examples of drinking the Kool-Aid, so to speak. I'm sorry, I couldn't resist. But there are a lot of examples of this. And we do this, as soon as we put down one thing, it's like so easy to pick up another to intoxicate ourselves with. It's the nature of our minds, of the untaught mind. Any other thoughts on that?
I think we should finish our reading. We have 7 minutes.
Sorry. I'm waxing poetic. I know who's next. Was it Leonardo? Can we finish the whole reading, Stephen?
Yeah, let's do it.
Oh my goodness. Okay, go for it, Leonardo.
Okay. So do I start at supposed bhikkhus?
No, the next one.
So too bhikkhus. Here we are. Whatever ascetics and Brahmins. Sorry, I have to move something here on the screen. I start again. So too, because whatever ascetics and Brahmins in the past, in the future, at present, regarding the world with a pleasant and agreeable nature as permanent, as happiness, as self, as healthy, as secure. They are nurturing craving. In nurturing craving and so forth, they are not freed from suffering, I say. Because whatever ascetics and Brahmins in the past regarded that in the world with a pleasant and agreeable nature as impermanent, as suffering, as non-self, as a disease, as fearful, they abandoned craving. In abandoning craving, they abandoned acquisition. In abandoning acquisition, they abandoned suffering. In abandoning suffering, they were freed from birth, aging, and death. They were freed from sorrow, lamentation, pain, displeasure, and despair. They were freed from suffering, I say.
Thank you so much.
Whatever ascetics and Brahmins in the future will regard that in the world with a pleasant and agreeable nature as impermanent, as suffering, as non-self, as a disease, as fearful, they will abandon craving. In abandoning craving, they will be freed from suffering, I say. Whatever ascetics and Brahmins at present regard that in the world with a pleasant and agreeable nature as impermanent, as suffering, as non-self, as a disease, as fearful, they abandon in craving. In abandoning craving, they are freed from suffering, I say. Should I keep going?
Maybe we can have somebody read the next bronze cup story.
Yeah.
Somebody who hasn't read?
Yeah, someone who hasn't read.
I can read it.
Beautiful.
Suppose, bhikkhus, there was a bronze cup of a beverage having a fine color, aroma, and taste, but it was mixed with poison. Then a man would come along, oppressed and afflicted by the heat, tired, parched, and thirsty. They would tell him, "Good man, this beverage in the bronze cup has a fine color, aroma, and taste, but it is mixed with poison. Drink it if you wish. If you drink it, it will gratify you with its color, aroma, and taste, but by drinking it, you will meet death or deadly suffering." Then the man would think, "I can quench my thirst with water, whey, porridge, or soup, but I should not drink that beverage, since to do so would lead to my harm and suffering for a long time." Having reflected, he would not drink the beverage, but would reject it, and thereby he would not meet death or deadly suffering. So too, bhikkhus, whatever ascetics and Brahmins in the past, in the future, at present, regard that in the world with a pleasant and agreeable nature as impermanent, as suffering, as non-self, as a disease, as fearful, they are abandoning craving. In abandoned craving, freed from suffering, I say.
Thank you so
Okay.
much.
We did it.
We did it, everyone. And you see how
Yay.
it's reflection, reflection, reflection. Do you want to just go through this, Stephen? And
Well, that was just my note of this chain that's given in sort of backwards order. So from the six sense bases, there is craving, or due to the six sense bases, there becomes craving. When craving arises, there is this upadhi. And then when there's upadhi, there is old age and death. That's sort of, in a way, how he's presenting it here. That's it. But certainly there's a lot of pushback to this. This doesn't seem like people are loving this. And there's lots of, well, what about this? Why can't I like that? And again, I just like to stress that I was thinking about one of the qualities of the Dhamma, there are six, is come and see. And related to the famous Kalama Sutta, where these savvy bunch of people, the Buddha shows up and he wants to maybe give a teaching, and they're like, well, you know, lots of people come through here. They all have their theories. Why should we believe you? And the answer he, in a way, gives is basically, try it for yourself. See if it works for you. Don't believe me. Don't believe anybody. Just believe what you find personally. And I think maybe that is a good answer even for this as well. that it's not about, well, the book says so and therefore it's true and I have to believe it, even if it doesn't seem right. It's more about see what's happening and try some of these suggestions and see what happens. And if it doesn't really work, then don't do it. I mean, it's all about a personal exploration as I see it.
And there you have it.
Yeah.
We've once again run out of metta time. That doesn't mean that we don't have metta for you all, because we do. But alas, we have run out of time. Leonardo, did you have your hand up anew, or is that from when the reading? Okay, he's muted. You're muted.
That's from the reading.
Oh, okay, very good.
Thank you for asking.
Absolutely. Folks, we've done it. And I hope that you are able to think about this for, the rest of the Sunday and maybe entering into next week. There's a lot to experience from the sutta. And that's what we want. We don't want to just study it for head learning, but we want the heart learning too. So with that, everyone, it's been lovely. And we hope to see you all again this coming Thursday. And if not, perhaps next Sunday. And thank you for spending your Sunday with us. We always appreciate you.
Thank you, Regina and
Thank
Stephen.
you. Thank you, Regina. Thank you, Stephen. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Good night. Stay safe.
Thank you. Good night.
To Diane.
Good night.
you.
Blessings.
Thank
Have a
you.
beautiful
Good to see you.
week.
Enjoy the evening.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Enjoy
you,
the
Leonardo.
evening.